Welcome to Interviews with Entrepreneur Show, where we interview entrepreneurs who are super awesome in their niches. And guys, RJ here, back again with an amazing guest on our show. So today's guest is Riggs Eckelberry. He's a nationally renowned entrepreneur dedicated to revolutionizing the water industry, which has reached a critical breaking point in recent years, despite being essential to the planet's survival. As a founding CEO of Origin Clear, he has developed innovative solutions to help businesses face rising challenges and innovative methods in order to tap into and figure out the problems with water bills, and tapping into the new investment market. Not only that, but also he is, this is something interesting I want to talk about, is like how he's actually using the water stable coin that is backed by water assets, which is pretty interesting to know about, and like how he's actually improvising this outdated, overrun, but underrated industry. So please welcome on the podcast, Riggs Eckelberry. Hey, Riggs, thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, RJ.
Awesome. So, like, can you like walk us through a little bit of your backstory, like how things started for you, and like how you fell into love with the water industry and felt like, okay, this is kind of like underrated market. Like I have to do something with it.
Yes. Well, to go back a little bit, I have been doing a lot of thinking about what you were talking about innovative solutions. Well, what does that really mean? I've adopted recently a motto, which I stole from an Air Jordan commercial from 15 years ago, which is break to build, break to build. So the concept here is if you want to really change an existing situation that is kind of frozen, then you've got to break it constructively to rebuild it, right? And really that's what we ran into with water. I have a high-tech background. I spent the 80s, computerizing companies in New York City, and then starting in the 90s, basically all the way through 2006, 2007 in .com and software. And I got used to the rapid disruption. It was taken for granted that it was constant change, invent. Oh, it's obsolete, do a new thing. And so the product life cycle was not like this. It was like cascading up, always. And you had to keep riding that upward waterfall, right?
Exactly.
Then somehow I landed in water. That's an interesting story because my ambition, which is my downfall, caused me to talk to a fund and say, hey, I'd like to be a CEO. I've spent 10 years on the CEO track. I'm ready. And they said, yes, we think so too. And so they said, we're not doing high tech anymore. We're doing green. And we want to do an algae startup for biofuels. At the time, crude was at $120, which is a lot, really, when you think it was 2007, right? It hasn't even gone back to that yet. And so we launched this algae thing. It was wonderful. It was fantastic. And that is a space that was in rapid transformation. Unfortunately, it got transformed by fracking. And it literally, fracking was the agency that broke the whole idea of alternative fuels because price of crude crashed to below $50 a barrel.
Yeah.
No. Now, we had to make a decision, and we decided to reuse our technology for the water industry. And because separating algae from water is very similar to separating sewage from water. Okay. So we had a technology advantage and application. So we launched into water. And that's when things slowed right down. And all of a sudden, I was in a very static industry. And from that point on, I was trying to figure out how do I get traction? How do I move the needle? As VCs in Silicon Valley like to say, move the needle,
yes.
Right? How do I move the needle? Initially, we were pushing technology licensing, and we were sort of in this spinning wheel. It turns out the water industry takes 12 to 15 years to adopt a new technology, and we didn't have that kind of funding, and we didn't have that kind of runway. And so we had to do something else. We started acquiring and creating companies, which has been our strength ever since. But in addition, in 2016, I got excited about the dramatic change happening in water, which is that the water infrastructure in North America and most of the rest of the world is broken. It's not going to be fixed anytime soon. It's very true in the Indian subcontinent as well. I mean, there's just a lack of infrastructure. And, India is spending $190 billion in the headwaters of the Himalayas
Yeah.
but nothing on municipal sewage. So perhaps that's true in Pakistan as well. So
Yep.
we have a problem of infrastructure. How do we solve it? Well, they're sending billions for war, but they're not spending billions on water. And so how do we handle it? Well, the revelation was that 90% of all water usage is by industry and agriculture. And that's true all over the world, except the ratio is different. For example, Somalia has 90% agriculture, 10% industry. In America, that 90% usage is half and half. And, I haven't checked the Pakistan numbers, but it's probably 60-40, something, it varies. But still,
Yep.
humans are only 10% of water usage, and we don't realize that. And so the problem and the solution is with industry agriculture. And
Oh,
what
wow.
I came across in 2016 was this new phenomenon of decentralized water, meaning do it yourself. Make industry do their own water treatment. And then people go right away, oh my God, that's like Nestle stealing all the water. Like, no, we're treating the dirty water that nobody is treating. I mean, RJ,
Hmm.
internationally, 80% of all sewage is never treated at all. It's just dumped. Only 20% is treated. That's a scandal in my book, right? So we really decided that this is the future. Unfortunately, 2016, there was no awareness. And in the break to build process, there's a stage where if you want to build something, you've got to sell the idea, right? Okay, I want to break the old thing and start the new. Well, you need to somehow get what Microsoft calls attachment, right? Attachment to something new. So how do you get attachment to the idea? And that we were super early for. But we made a very good decision in 2018 to bring in a guru of decentralized water, Dan Early. And over the years, we built a whole division that does that. I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's how I got into the space, and that's how we're trying to disrupt it.
Oh, wow. This is actually amazing. First of all, decentralizing it and like back it by any sort of like a stable coin, or by a coin, for example. So like, how does that work out? Because everybody have that different amount of sort of like, water in their country, stuff like that. Maybe we can even call it decentralized, as you mentioned, like, the amount of like sewerage, stuff like that. Like, how that actually can get like backed by a digital currency. I'm curious to ask that.
Yes, so it's a very, I, like everyone else, I got swept up in the 2018 craze, right? Crypto got crazy in 2018,
Yeah.
and we launched a development program called Water Chain, which was our first
Okay.
with the blockchain idea. It was great, but there was one big problem. It turned out to be a fundamental problem, which is how do you price water? Water
Yes.
has widely divergent pricing, based in great
Everywhere.
part on legacy rights. I own water, you don't. I'm okay, you're not, right? So it's actually, if you think, water justice is probably the biggest problem in the world. There's the most dramatic. People in Africa are walking 5 miles for water. Here, I just turn on the tap. There's no more greater inequity than
Yeah.
water, in my opinion. Okay, so we put that on the shelf, said, no, this is not going to work. And what we decided to do was get back to basics and do fundamentals. What we then started creating, starting in 2020, was an idea of water as a service, right? In other words, if we're going to take over from the local utility, which charges businesses by the meter, then why are we asking the business to pay $1 million? Why not just give them a machine that remains ours, and they continue to pay by the gallon on the meter, right? That became the very interesting way of first of all, taking the capital problem, right? And also created a whole investment project, which I'll talk about separately. But it also meant that, and in water on demand, every gallon has roughly the same price, and every gallon is monetized.
Mm.
And that's the
Yeah.
basis for future tokenization, because now, whether I have water on demand in California or in Singapore, it's going to be roughly the same expense. Why? Because they're just talking about the cost of machinery and personnel, and it's roughly the same. It'll vary by 30, 40%, but it's not 5 times difference, right? So it becomes more narrow, because my ambition is that someone in Northern California who's got a real water problem could offset their financial risk with options on Singapore water. That'd be wonderful, right? Okay, it's not possible now, but it would be a dramatic improvement. What we put into the sort of developmental stage right now is something called $H2O, which is a security token that securitizes the dividend payouts. I was talking to you about the investment side. If I'm going to let RJ, who has, let's say you have a greenhouse project, right? And you use a lot of water for that greenhouse, and you need to treat your water, your dirty water, and I'm going to give you a system, fine, and you're not going to pay for it up front. Well, who's going to pay for that system? We can't pay for it. We can only pay for a little bit of it. We can't pay for it scaling up to thousands and tens of thousands of sites. So we created a financial vehicle so that people can invest in water as an asset, just like they invest in energy projects, oil well master limited partnerships in the US, which is a $300 billion sector where people invest in baskets of oil and gas projects and they get royalties. And so we decided to do exactly the same thing. And it's been amazingly popular because people like the idea of generational royalties, great, plus all kinds of equity and stock, blah, blah, blah. But it's water, not oil. And they prefer that, right? They like it more. So now we have investors, they're going to get dividends. Now, in the short term, we can use bank deposit, SWIFT, whatever, that's fine. But as it scales up, it's more practical to tokenize it. And then if I want to transfer all my future dividend income stream to RJ, I just do a little crypto transfer, whoop, and now you've got it in your wallet, just like that. And that creates over time a market. So that's our vision for it. Now, practical world, we had to de-emphasize it. Why? Because we're going through a whole bunch of SEC approvals for what we're doing. And the SEC does not like crypto right now.
No. Absolutely.
So we put these registration requests through the SEC, and the last thing we want is for them to put us on the shelf because it's crypto. So we said, no. And this is how it is. Crypto's in background. We're focusing on the underlying commercial machinery because I strongly believe that a healthy crypto currency is one based on assets.
Yeah.
Back to assets. So I believe in the future that very, very healthy tokens will exist in energy, in wheat, in pig bellies and water, right? So because they have an underlying commercial activity, tokenized real estate. This is all very, very healthy, and it's not subject to these tremendous. I love crypto, but the problem with crypto is you have these huge wells of black money, like Bitcoin. Probably a third of all Bitcoin is dark. We have no idea where it is, right? And they could just manipulate with it. It's unregulated. Well, when it's asset-based, you can't really do that. It's just like gold standard for money, right? It's a very similar thing. So that's
backed by something.
Yeah. So that's what I like right now. Bitcoin is the exception because it's special, but most other currencies, and Ethereum I like because of smart contracts. But after that, you then have to think about backing.